7:14. I will call the meeting of the WISD Board of Trustees to order. Please let the record show that all 7 trustees are in attendance. This meeting has been duly called and notice the meeting has been duly posted for time and manner required by law. At this time, Mr. Schofield will lead us in our invocation, followed by Mr. Starnader with our pledges.
Father, thank you for the opportunity that we have to gather to further the business for our community. We ask that you bless us with wisdom and help us to judge the input from the community and serve you as best we can through the vehicle you provide us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, first item on our agenda would be the 2019-2020 budget update. Be you, Mr. Calden?
Yes, sir.
Dark.
All right, good evening, board. Last time we met, we had a Money Matters discussion about the budgeting cycle and where we are. So wanted to go ahead and take some time today and have a little discussion about House Bill 3 and what the legislature has done with school funding so that you'll understand some of our challenges as we're going through this new budget cycle. So this is a budget update, what we think we know at this point. There's one thing that we are required to have a discussion on that really going forward is not going to be germane to anything that we do. But as part of our first rating, we have to have a discussion on the property tax lag as it relates to state funding. Within the old state funding formula, one of the components was the district local contribution or local measure. That was always calculated using 1-year-old property tax values. So for a growing district, you would get the benefit of student enrollment in the current year, but you wouldn't be harmed as much with property value growth because it'd always be a year behind. So in years of massive property value growth, you'd be using last year's values with current year students. That works really great if you're growing. If you're declining, that's really terrible because you are using last year's higher values when you have fewer students or fewer taxable values for local property tax. The state is not, with the passage of House Bill 3, the state is not going to be using historical property values anymore. It's going to be current values, which is going to give us a little bit of an issue in year one because the comptroller typically does not do all the audits and know what the current taxable values are until, say, November to March, somewhere in that range, depending on if there is a property value study appeal and the outcome of that. So we're going to be at a little bit of a unknown territory in year one as we switch to current year property values, but that is going to be the method going forward as determined by House Bill 3. So I wanted you to know what property tax lag funding was because it is a requirement for our first rating, but going forward, this really is not going to be germane to anything as it goes to state funding because we've now moved from prior year values to current year values. Changes in House Bill 3. So there were a bunch of funding formulas and funding components in old state law that have changed or been eliminated or have been replaced with something completely different going forward. So the basic allotment was about $5,100 and it's been increased by $1,000 per student to $6,100 or $6,160. SPED mainstream has received an additional weight of 0.05 of a student per ADA. Career and Tech has been expanded from just 9 through 12 funding to now include 7th and 8th grade funding. Comp Ed used to be, we used to receive compensatory education funds from the state based on the free and reduced meals served. The state is doing away with that and coming up with a tiered 5 census group weighted allotment for students. So the basic Comp Ed allotment funding is going to go up. It went from a 2.0 scale to 2 2/4 scale. but we have to wait on the state to assign the 5 census groups at this point. So there is a preliminary list that's been sent out from TEA. As you would expect, we don't have any students that fit in the highest funding group because we are not that economically disadvantaged in any part of our school zone compared to other campuses and districts in the state. But right now, that's really a guess from the state. They have to go back and assign students to a census category, one of those 5 categories on their end, and then they'll send us that information and that'll get updated. Transportation allotment went from a linear density to a per mile allotment. High school allotment was completely repealed, so we used to receive $275 per high school ADA. That amount has been completely repealed from the state. And then the gifted and talented funding allotment has also been repealed from the state. Some new funding programs and components. Dual language now has its own allotment from the state. Dyslexia has its own allotment from the state for all students with an IEP or 504. Early enrollment allotment. So the state has also mandated that pre-K be full day, but they didn't fund full day pre-K. They came up with this early enrollment allotment or early education allotment. So for every economically disadvantaged or English language learning student in grades K through 3, their average daily attendance will produce a funding weight for this early education allotment that is supposed to cover the extra cost of full day pre-K. And running it in our models, we think that that will work just fine for Waxahachie ISD. But just to let you know, pre-K is now a full day program. The state is still funding it as a half-day program, and this early education allotment is supposed to make up that difference. There's also a fast growth allotment that will give the top 25% of districts with enrollment growth in the state an additional funding. Based on the original list that TEA put out, we are on that list, as we would expect. Dropout recovery, state has come up with a new $275 per student for dropout recovery measure. We don't know the specific criteria yet. We're waiting on additional information from TEA on that. A couple more that we don't really know fully yet. Teacher incentive allotment, we're awaiting details from the commissioner. A college, career, and military ready outcome allotment. We're again waiting on some thresholds to be established by the commissioner to have an idea of what those targets are. In general, you're looking at about $5,000 for students who are special education or low income that meet the college, career, and military ready thresholds established by the state. $2,000 for students who are not special ed or economically disadvantaged that meet those thresholds, but we're still waiting on those thresholds at this point. A new mentor teacher allotment. Again, we're waiting on details from the commissioner. And then the state also expanded the fee reimbursements for college prep and CTE examination courses. Other changes, you may remember a couple of legislative cycles ago, the state moved from there was a $1.50 cap on the M&O rate, and the state compressed that by 2/3. And so that gave us our $1 base M&O rate. You could add 4 cents to it without a local election. If you did the local election, you could add up to 13 more cents to get you to the $1.17. The state has now taken that dollar compression and compressed it even more to 93 cents on that dollar. The effective for everybody in the state, all school districts will see a decrease in the M&O tax rate. So Waxahachie ISD, you're probably going to see it go down to $1.684. That would be the absolute cap that our M&O rate could be from $1.17. So you're looking at a 10+ cent decrease in the tax rate. And then the compression next year moves from 93 cents to 91, a little over 91.5 cents. So next year, the tax rate will have to compress even further, just to kind of let you know what's up on the horizon. There's also a 2.5% growth limitator on the M&O tax values. This does not exempt new taxable values. For a while there, new to the roll values were going to be exempted from the 2.5% growth. In the final bill that was adopted, the new values are not exempted from that growth. So it will be overall M&O tax value growth limited to 2.5% annually going forward. House Bill 3 also has a provision that prohibits M&O tax rates to support debt service. Mr. Rogers, I know at one point one of your desires was to see us pay down our debt even faster. The only real way to accomplish that now would be to artificially increase the INS rate. And so one of the components in next year's budget that we're having to remove is any debt service payments to hit the M&O or from M&O because of this provision. So also tax ratifications election, the short version of it is they've been moved to uniform election dates. The long version is essentially this year there will be no TREs in the state of Texas. So going forward, you can have TREs after you have a efficiency audit that is done. We're waiting on the Legislative Budget Board to come out with what that entails, what you're looking at, what those metrics are. But essentially, it's a moratorium on TREs this year. New instructional facilities allotment, this is one that we had been talking about last year with the opening of the high school. Current funding is $1,000 per ADA in a new facility. That same funding is going to remain in effect going forward. The state has now allocated additional funds, though. It was $25 million per year. It's now $100 million per year. So this year, we're going to take about, a 78% haircut on our NIFA. So we're eligible for about 2.2 million. We'll probably get about 500,000 because the state allocated 25 million and there were 106 million in projects submitted for new instructional facilities allotment money. Next year, under those same scenarios, if the 100 million was for this year, we'd take about a 1% haircut. So just kind of give you a general idea of what you're looking at. A lot more funds will be available for new instructional facilities allotment. So as Max Simpson Elementary opens, we'll be able to apply for that new instructional facilities allotment. It should receive a lot more money per student.
So with the agri-science facility, does it have to be literally instructional, or couldn't it be?
The agri-science facility, we'll have to go back and look at the guidelines that are put out by the commissioner, but absolutely, that would be a new instructional facility because it's not just a barn. It does have classroom space in it, instructional space in it. So we definitely could look into that funding. And then recaptures now is not based on your tax rate or wealth per student, or it is based on your values relative to your tax rate, not on wealth per student. Through all of our funding models that we've been working through for the last couple of weeks since this came out, we are not in a recapture scenario where we are repaying. So we're feeling better about that. And really, right now, TA has us in a recapture for this fiscal year, but we just turned in numbers that we truly believe will get us out of most of that recapture. So other changes, we've talked a little bit about full-day pre-kindergarten being a requirement. Right now, within the state has a couple of different funding requirements. So you have career tech, you have gifted and talented, you have special education, you have bilingual education. They all come with different requirements. The state gives you some money, and for gifted and talented, you spend 52% of that on the program. For career tech, it's 58%. For comp ed, it's 55%. And for bilingual, it's 52%. Well, for the ones that are surviving the haircut, so not for gifted and talented, but for comp ed, career tech, bilingual, and the college and career military readiness, those are all going to go to 55%. So most of those are going up. Career tech's coming down a little bit, but you're also expanding the number of grades that are subject to career tech funding. So that should be a win. And then again, we talked about moving to the current year property values. The real big hindrance, we talked about it a little bit, the real big hindrance on that is we don't get those certified values from the appraisal district till the end of July. They still have to be approved by the comptroller's office, and that normally is somewhere between November and February, just depending on the property value studies and any appeals that you may file. So one big component that we haven't talked about at this point are the required staff salary increases. And I know that you've heard a lot about it, and I'm surprised I didn't put a little bit more on there for you, but here's what I know at this point. For the changes, anytime the basic allotment changes going forward, 30% of additional revenues gained from the foundation school program side must be spent on staff increases for non-administrators. Of that 30%, 75% goes to teachers, librarians, counselors, and nurses. The other 25% goes to everybody else who's not an administrator. So right now, we are working through the formulas and the programs to try to figure out what 30% is. 30% is our basic, it's our minimum, it's our requirement. That's not necessarily our goal. But once we figure out what that number is, that will give us a really good idea of what we have to at least meet. Once we know that number, then we'll know what 75% is and what 25% is and how we can go through that. Now, one thing in the bill, it does not say that salary has to be increased. It says compensation has to be increased. One of the components that we are looking at is increasing the contribution from the district for health insurance. Here's the biggest problem with that. We only have about 54% of our staff that takes our health insurance. So every dollar we spend additionally on health insurance, I have a super minority that is not going to benefit from that because they don't take district health insurance. So that's kind of our big component that we're looking at right now when it comes to staff salary increases. We've talked about moving it up to the Active Care 1 HD or the high deductible member only amount, where if you take high deductible plan, you would pay $0 every month. But again, the problem with that is you've got about 48 or 50% of our staff that doesn't take our health insurance, so they would see $0 benefit on that end. So a new funding formula or new funding template came out from Omar Garcia recently. I want to tell you it's last Wednesday. And so we've been putting our numbers in there and working through it. We have a general estimate of what the 30% required would be and how that funnels out to 75 and 25. But we also need to look at our compression again for next year because, again, our tax rate is going to go down a little bit. So we need to look at that and make sure that we're not recommending something to you that can't be sustainable. So that's kind of where we are with House Bill 3. I know that's a lot of stuff to go through, but this is what's keeping us up at night. This is what's causing us to go sharpen our Excel formulas and all the fun things that we're working on right now when it comes to budget. So any questions from the board on House Bill 3?
Ryan, when you say the M&O is going to go from 117 to 10684,
Yes, sir.
what does that mean to the taxpayer?
Your average taxable value last year.
We're at 155.38, right? Does it affect that
Yes,
number?
sir. The 155.38 will also go down by that same 10 cents, 10 plus cents. So you'd be at $1.44 and change.
And that's mandated. I mean, that's mandated by the state.
The M&O, so again, there's two components to your tax rate. You got M&O and INS. The state mandated M&O to go down. They don't touch INS. So yes, sir, for all intents and purposes, INS will still be the 38, 39 that it currently is. The M&O is going to drop from $1.17 to $1.0684. Add those two together and you're going to be at, I'm trying to do mental math on the fly here, $1.44 and change. If you're looking at the average taxable value in Waxahachie being $185,000, a 10-cent reduction, you're looking about $185 reduction in the average tax bill for homeowners. So, and that would be annually, and that would be going forward as far as I know. There's no, I don't see it going the other way. I don't see the compression being released from the state.
What I was getting at is we're not going to drop it in one spot and raise it in another. That's going to be a net reduction to the taxpayer.
Based off the information we have right now from the appraisal district, we fully believe we have the funds available in the INS fund with current year property values to fully support the debt service of the district. So yes, sir, that would be a full 10-cent reduction, 10-plus cent reduction on that total tax rate. We do not anticipate any need to raise the INS rate to support debt service operations.
Perfect. I'll take turns. I got some other questions. Go ahead.
When do you see us being able to tell our staff how much of a raise they will be getting?
That's a very good question. So we were working through today. We have a model in there that we are trying to get a cost on. I fully anticipate a little more guidance got sent out by the state. They're putting out some shorts and some information. And so the first one they're putting out is regarding what the teacher pay requirement is going forward and how to calculate that. And that we expect that out this week. I expect that out Wednesday or Thursday. I will tell you right now, I fully anticipate every teacher, librarian, counselor, nurse to see at least a $2,000 pay increase. Now, within the pay increase, there is a requirement that it be differentiated. So those who have more than 5 years of service are supposed to see a disproportionate advantage in their pay increase compared to those who are 0 through 5 years. So when I tell you all staff should receive, right now our model is everyone getting at least $2,000. That would be the 0 to 5 year. Once we know that our budget is fiscally sound and something we can support and maintain, we'll know what that 6 through 30 year number is.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
You talked about the option of going to the higher deductible to make it zero cost to our participants.
Yes, sir.
I know you said there were 42% of the people that do not participate, but I wonder if you can anticipate or speculate that if we did go to that zero deductible, that more people would take advantage of that. You know,
honestly,
one would trigger the other, you know.
I honestly believe that you're right. I think if we offered it at no cost, some people would participate. Here's the problem on the high deductible plan, and this is just my opinion. Someone else in the room will give you a completely different opinion because it's worked out for him. The high deductible plan has a really high out-of-pocket maximum. And if you have not been saving for it, if you have not been planning for it, if you haven't been diligent with setting up a health savings account and putting some of that money aside for it, it can be a real shocker, some of those bills and some of those out-of-pocket maximums that you would be subject to until you get those other mechanisms in place. Do you have that health savings account in place to help you meet all that? That's the part I worry about, would be the sticker shock. Someone saying, I'll have health insurance, it's free, let me sign up for it. But if they're not putting money into that health savings account and they get hit with the $13,000 family out-of-pocket maximum, that could be crippling for a lot of people.
Right.
So I agree with you. I think a lot of people would see that as an enticement and look to sign up. But I think once they get into the details, that high out-of-pocket maximum annually, individually, and family would probably be a deterrent for a good number of our people.
John, I'll tell you that from my family's perspective, we switched to the HG. We are a pretty healthy bunch. We don't go to the doctor very much, and for us, it's been fantastic.
Right.
So I think it depends on the family, but for us, it's been.
Yeah, Clay will tell you, with my personal insurance, you know, I view insurance, and I don't pretend to put myself in a teacher's position, but just me personally, I view insurance as something for catastrophic events, you know, so I would think, personally, I would lean towards the higher deductible and, you know, hope for the best type deal, so, I mean, that might, you know, bring some of them on board, I don't know.
And I agree with you. The only thing that I would counter a little bit with is, for me, I would completely agree with you. Should be for catastrophic events and all that fun stuff. But I think when you have younger kids, some of that,
Sure.
you never know, you know, when you go to a T-ball game, when you're going to catch a ball in the mouth, and that may be catastrophic or whatever it may, because you got different people in different situations. And so that would be the hard part.
Mr. Calden, do we have any idea how many people we have on staff who don't have any insurance? Because I think that it would be preferable to those people. If they don't have any insurance, you know, they would switch to us, but then that would affect the funding mechanism for that
The
also.
only thing I could even get close to telling you would be how many don't have our insurance. It's not a requirement that we have, you know, a survey of people who doesn't have any insurance. I could give you a general idea of how many don't have ours, but I really don't know on the backside who doesn't have any insurance. Yes, ma'am.
With the mandatory state compression of the tax rate and the increase in funding, do we know what that's going to do to our district from a net perspective?
Right now, based off our numbers that we're looking at a total increase in revenue about $7 million.
With our tax rate going down?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the state really has come through and put in a lot more money to make it. 15, 20 years ago, the state was 70-30, state 70, districts 30. And you've seen that switch, and it's more the districts 70 and the state 30. Really, the state has gotten it back to, I want to say at the last training I went to, it was about 45-55. States 45, and districts are about 55% of funding. With the way the formula is written right now, it should stay in that general range, 55 to 50% district requirement versus state requirement. So at this point, the state really they made a large contribution to school district funding in this legislative session.
What I read, it looked like most of the stuff has been state
I believe you're right. I think going forward, you're not seeing a bunch of accelerators, you're not seeing a bunch of I don't want to say gimmickly clauses, but you're seeing things that have been fairly well thought out and fairly well agreed on both sides. So I would imagine there's going to be some stability for a while as you go through this funding formula.
Good deal.
Any other questions for Mr. Calden? Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
This is the Ryan Calden now, so.
Oh, you still up? So next time
Tired of
on,
hearing from me
Over-
real
You get a
fast.
hat, so you can put on a different hat now. since
Yeah.
you're rezoning.
I'm the prognosticator now.
so next item is overview of upcoming rezoning for Max Simpson Elementary.
Board, you have a memo in the board book tonight. Just wanted to kind of give you a real general update on the rezoning for Max Simpson Elementary. Laid out in the memo for you what I think some of our priorities should be as we go through rezoning, but kind of wanted to get your feedback, and it can be via an email after this meeting or at some other point. But just kind of wanted to get your feedback on what the priorities for Max Simpson Elementary zoning should be, because it will not only affect elementary, but it will also affect junior highs as well. So anyway, just we sat down this past week, started working on a very, very preliminary plan because we have data from October. And so we will pull data again after school starts, probably around Labor Day, and meet with the demographer again so that we have the most current information, so that we know what student populations look like, both in terms of count and in terms of socioeconomic status, so that we can try to get these campuses as close to equitable as we can, but also knowing that we want to maintain neighborhood schools and we want to maintain a smaller campus size, especially at elementary. When you get to junior highs, our real goal is to have equality amongst the junior highs because we're doing a feeder pattern. So we don't want one campus sitting out there at 10% economically disadvantaged and the other sitting out there at 70% economically disadvantaged. We want them to to look representative of our community. So if that's 45 to 50%, they should all be roughly 45 to 50% economically disadvantaged and have a well thought out feeder pattern and not have it just scattershot. So present all that to you tonight, just kind of give you a general idea of where we are in rezoning. It's still a little bit early. We'll kick it off really in the fall. Hope to have something for your approval before the end of this calendar year so that we can start communicating that to parents.
I don't think I was involved with the last one. I think it was before I was on board here. But what all did we do to maximize like community involvement in the process? Did we have town halls or did we have? Okay.
We did have a couple of town hall meetings. We also involved our district advisory team, which is made up, I'm not going to tell you half because that's probably not entirely true. It is made up of a lot of community members. It is made up of a lot of teachers outside of this building. It's made up of, well, staff members outside this building. All teachers are outside this building. But anyway, it is made up of a lot of different people who are not named Ryan Calden and Jenny Bridges and Lee Avenshine trying to draw maps or draw lines on a map. So we did reach out. We had a lot of participation in the second of our two. The first one was kind of an information gathering, then word kind of got out, hey, they're having another one. The second one, in my recollection, was a whole lot better attended with a lot more input and feedback. But that's the plan again for this time, is there will be a community outreach before we ask for final approval.
If I remember correctly, the demographer came up with a general plan, and after that second community meeting, there were a lot of changes that were made. Not everyone was happy, but I would say the overwhelming majority of the issues were addressed.
Yeah. Was Melissa involved in that? Starnator? Did you participate in that?
Yes, I was on, yes.
Right, well, I was on the rezoning committee
Okay.
that they have. But, and we gave recommendations. But I'm trying to think, I'm
I
sorry.
mean, as
I'm
long as
drawing a
we
blank.
just provide the opportunity, I mean, you can't
Right,
make
yeah,
them.
oh, yeah.
You know, that's
I
what,
think the most progress was made in the whole process at that last meeting and listening to the people that were affected. I really do. I think that, I thought it went really great. Wasn't that the last one that was at the Fine Arts Center?
Right.
I think people had a lot of really valid points that we gave them a chance to explain, and we were able to make a lot of easy changes that really helped a lot of people. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely.
And Mr. Rogers, one reason we're starting earlier is to do just that, because typically, the committee structure is a good way to get started, and we've got a good committee in place, and of course, other people would be welcome to come. It's when we say, this is our preliminary study, and the board hears, and also having the opportunity to say, well, what if we move that line, and the demographer can say, well, that just saved you 20 kids, instead of what you might think it would be, and then taking it, when the board sort of gets comfortable with that, taking it, have as many open forums that would be the only topic until, because we'd really like to cover as much for probably elementary number, make it as easy when 11 opens, so there possibly wouldn't be as many changes and so much upheaval.
And that was taken into account the last time we rezoned, is try not to affect every single zone the next time we do it, or with as little impact as possible.
Y'all did a pretty good job of that, too.
And I think that we did a good job of explaining to primarily Felty and Shackelford that some of them are going to be rezoned. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just based on where they are geographically. So I think that people have an idea already that, yes, this is coming, and we're going to try to make it as easy on them as possible.
Generally speaking, did they uproot kids or did they let them stay where they were?
No grandfathering.
They could switch mid, in the third grade.
That's
They
correct.
weren't entitled to stay
That's correct.
until the fifth grade.
That is correct. I think the time before that, they did rezoning, they allowed that to happen, and it was not as positive
I
of an
think they
experience.
ended up pretty much grandfathering down to first grade if people wanted to stay.
I think
and
that's
it
what
didn't
creates
work
the
out
most,
well.
that creates the most heartache. And I wonder if the demographer can bring back both options. I mean, I know the longer you dance, the more it costs the fiddler, but, I wonder if they could study it both ways.
When you talk about grandfathering first grade, I understand grandfathering fifth grade. You've been at this school for 6 years, so I can understand grandfathering that type, but to grandfather a first grader?
No, well.
Okay, so you're not the fifth grade.
Yeah, maybe third or fourth or fifth.
Didn't when we grandfathered, they just did fourth and fifth grade? I may be wrong on that. I'm just trying to remember.
When they rezoned in 2014, was it 14? I think they grandfathered pretty much down to first grade. If you wanted to stay on your campus.
It started with,
Graders, if you had first grade siblings.
it started with fifth
Okay.
grade, and then you ran into hardships of, well, now my kids are going to different campuses, and by the time, as
I
Ms.
think
Mott
it
was just
created
saying,
more
by the
problems
time
than
you got to
solved.
the end, it was siblings of fifth graders, which went all the way down to second, first.
But you
I
could
can
also
see that.
say, we're
I can
going
see
to,
that.
no siblings. If you want to keep your fifth grader, that would be okay, but then if you choose that fifth grade, you're also choosing to then be at two different schools, and that's
Right.
kind of and it also kind of cuts it back when you've got to provide your own transportation. That's also a qualifier, and that's difficult for most, but it can't be considered a hardship.
Any other questions for Mr. Caldwell? Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. And if more of those questions, those types of questions come up, again, we will be kicking this off in earnest in September, October, and so, we would welcome your feedback so that we can not necessarily hit a home run on the first try, but that's our goal. We're going to try to hit a home run on the first try.
And we would like to have this out as early as possible. I mean, March would be late. If we could do it in February, it would be better. Then people aren't so rushed.
Okay, item C will be method of elections. Mr. Avenshaw? You're all right, don't hurry.
If Mr. Aubenstein looks very relaxed, he just came back from it was actually a mission trip, so it wasn't a total vacation, but he's been in the swamps
great.
of Houston.
Yes, no, it was absolutely great. Thank you, Dr. Kane. At your last board meeting, I gave you a presentation regarding the method by which trustees can be elected. It's governed BBB legal and BBB local of the WISD board policy. Our current method of elections is the base model, the model from which all districts start. And if there is no local election, no local change, then you have a at-large election process with no places or positions by which two or three trustees are elected in each of every 3 years, with the top vote getters out of the big pool then being elected to the board. The Education Code out of Chapter 11 gives you two options aside from that base model. There's the position place model, which the majority of districts in Region 10 have adopted. The majority of large districts in the state have adopted. If you adopt it, you can't change it, but it's the method by which you assign places. And so in 1 year, you'd have place 1, place 2, or however the places get defined. The next year you'd have 2 more, and then that third year you have the 3. We would keep the same rotation of 2, 3, but they would be places as opposed to the complete at large. The vast majority of those districts that opt to do that particular method don't have single member districts, but rather still are voted at large, or just voted at large to a position or a place. There are a few districts in the state, a small handful in Region 10, that do have single member districts, and that's another method. To do a single member district takes a lengthy process with at least 120 days notice, public hearings, and then having divided lines within the district that apply under the Voting Rights Act, one person, one vote principles, meaning that all of the districts have to have a representative number of people. You can't have one district that only has a few people and another district that has a ton of people. So to not dilute any person's vote, and you also have to look and analyze and make sure that you haven't unfairly or disproportionately disenfranchised any race or any segment of your population by the districts you've created. Those are the 3 types of methods by which you can elect trustees. So I answered questions on June 10th. We will be bringing this back to the board for another discussion before any potential action. The procedure to adopt position or place elections is relatively easy. It's straightforward. In all of the large districts in Ellis County, and by that I mean Midlothian, Red Oak, Ennis, and Ferris have adopted that method. So long as you have an agenda item more than 60 days prior to the election, that is something that this board can do. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If you have any questions after tonight, I'd be happy to answer those as well. And we'll be bringing this back for another discussion prior to any potential action.
So I have a quick question. I didn't bring my notes from the last meeting. So assuming the way we do it now is step 1, going to places is step 2. It's a pretty simple process. But if you want to go from step 2 to step 3, which would be individual districts, it's a pretty lengthy process that not just the 7 of us could say, this is what we want to do. Or
we would have, Education Code Chapter 11 requires public hearings. It requires, and it's not just Chapter 11 of the Education Code, Texas, but you got to comply with the Voting Rights Act. And so you've got a process by which you'd be looking at the 2010 census, and you'd have to do it again after the 2020 census. So if you wanted to do single member districts, most districts that have single member districts didn't do it voluntarily because citizens can petition their district if there's been a pattern of alleged discrimination, disenfranchisement. And so where you see those districts, a lot of times it's because there was a suit, and either by settlement or by order of a federal court, those districts enter into single member districts. And those are then ultimately subject to analysis every 10 years, reanalysis every 10 years. Every time you have a census, you've got to look and make sure that your districts have a representative number of people so that you aren't disenfranchising any vote, and you've got to analyze the demographics within each district.
That's a pretty lengthy policy.
Oh, yes. And it's one that the county has to have for commissioners' precincts. So it's not unfamiliar to governmental entities in the county, but I believe Ellis County is the only one. I'm not certain about cities, were there any cities that have true single-member districts within the county? I know Ellis County, like for Commissioners Court, it has to, every 10 years, reanalyze its precincts to make sure it complies with the Voting Rights Act. And that is a lengthy process, an expensive process, because you need to bring in a consultant to help you do that.
So it would, if the board chooses, it would be very, very lengthy, very, very public, and somewhat difficult, not in a procedural way, but it would ensure that a lot of people were, I think there's a lot of fear that, I mean, some people think it's just the next step, as opposed to, like President Autry said, the first step is really not that large of a step, but if we were to go to the next level, it would be huge.
Agreed.
Any other questions, Mr.
No,
Ellis?
I think I have a pretty good feel for position in place. I don't think we're in a position to even entertain the district boundaries, precincts, or whatever you want to call it. But a lot of the feedback I've been getting is we haven't been able to really articulate why we want to, or potentially want to, look at position in place. And even though I have my personal reasons why I think it's a good idea, maybe we should try to articulate that in a pros and cons fashion, like a side-by-side comparison at large versus position in place. And, in the meantime, between now and when our next meeting is, maybe we'll get some more feedback on that as far as the public. And I don't know if you'd feel comfortable authoring something like that.
I'm certainly willing to try. I'm certainly willing to put some of that forward. Now, this is one of those decisions that's truly the trustee's decision. This is truly something that is within your discretion of how you govern and how you want, essentially, your offices to be elected. So this isn't something that is really coming by recommendation from the superintendent or administration.
No, I understand that, but even Walsh, they have people that specialize in elections, and maybe they have something that already in their archives that show the pros and cons of the different methods.
And I'm happy to research. I'm happy to put something together and bring that back to you at your July meeting.
You may not, I bet Walsh Gagos has something already, knowing them. Melissa?
I'll give you a plus for a pro for moving to places, and that is that when you have to file for a place for an election, I think it motivates people to file to run for the Board of Trustees for the right reasons. You would have to, if you're going to put your name on the ballot, you're going to have to think long and hard about filing. You have to think, well, am I just going to put my name on the ballot in an at-large election to see if I'm popular or see if, see if I get elected? Or, if there's a strong person on the board that's up for reelection, an incumbent, then, if they're really strong and they're on the board for the right reasons and they're all about kids, then, that process will help protect those types of trustees. And then if, also if you have a weak person, if you have a weak board member that's maybe not on the board for the right reasons, then that gives an opportunity for someone to file against that person.
I think it's all about accountability. And if you're a trustee for the right reasons and you're doing a good job, you want to be held accountable. And what other way, if someone personally challenges you, for your place, it's a pretty good sign of accountability there.
Mr. Schofield?
I have something else to add to that. The last several years in our community, we've had a big issue and debate among a lot of people in the use of the so-called undervote in elections. When you have set places, I do not agree with the geographical places. I don't think we're in any stretch the imagination anywhere close to that, and would probably take legal action to get you there like it has in other large districts. But you remove that undervote situation from this, because I do feel that has hurt our community at times when people don't vote as many times as they can in places you don't get the right people in, or leave some people out, or it's a more pure form of election in my mind.
They'll go for the pro. See, that's a pro.
That's a pro in my mind.
Any other comment? Mr. McCutcheon?
On the city side, do they have to have a community vote before they determine to go to places?
Ultimately, the city has city charter. And so I believe the answer is yes, that would require an amendment that would require public election. I mean, honestly, I have not spent a whole lot of time researching the city's process by which to change its method of election. I mean, I know firmly our process under the education code for what we would need to do.
Okay.
Ours is a relatively easy process, particularly if we're just doing position place.
And the one caveat of if you change, you can't change back, or it's
Correct.
next to impossible to change
You
back.
can't go back.
Statutorily, it is impossible.
Okay. Walsh kind of disputed that, but
Okay.
I'll take it for your word.
I mean, statutorily, at least the way the statute's written, it's irrevocable.
Be interesting to see what they have to say after this. Or we can see that from somebody that's done it.
Any other questions, comments? Robinson? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, now, under action items, we have consideration of possible action to award contract for roofing repairs at Coleman Junior High to Precision Waterproofing and Roofing.
Mr.
In the
Collins
amount
about to go on vacation. I wanna make sure he does not-
Get his exercise in back and forth. Board, you'll remember 2 weeks ago at our last meeting that Mr. Craig was talking about the roof consultant that was going to go up on the roof at Coleman Junior High and walk it to make sure that everything that we had previously asked for your approval was included. Well, come to find out, there's a couple of areas that we have water infiltration in the proposed area to be replaced, that the moisture content is too high for the roof repairs to be warrantable. So tonight, what I'm asking you to do is throw out everything that we've already done. At this point, you've approved $105,114 worth of repairs at Coleman Junior High. I'm asking you to set that aside and award the same contractor, Precision Waterproofing and Roofing, a contract in the amount of $116,014. So they've identified $10,900 worth of repair work that needs to be done on within the building for the to remedy the water moisture issue, to get the insulation back where it needs to be to make the TPO roof repairs warrantable. So that's where we are at this point, based off of their recommendation from walking the roof 2 weeks ago.
Refresh my memory on the length of that warranty.
It is 20 years, no questions asked.
Any questions, Mr. Collins? Okay, now I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the repairs for Coleman Junior High Precision Waterproofing Roofing in the amount of $116,014.
Mr. President, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the repair of Coleman Junior High roofing to Precision Waterproofing and Roofing in the amount of $116,014.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, consideration regarding the board's selection of an external financial auditor group for the district. Mr. Calden?
Thanks, sir. About a year ago, Board, you told us that you would like for us to switch auditors, and that's a process that we've been going through. We posted a solicitation and received 2 responses, at which point you were not excited with the 2 responses that we got. So we came up with a new method. We reached out to every auditor who had done a school district audit engagement in regions 10, 11, or 12 in fiscal year 18. So the most current list that TEA has out. There were 30 auditors in that list. We reached out to every single one of them, and 15 of them told us they would be interested in at least looking at our proposal. Deadline came and went. We had 5 responses. So we've summarized it for you on page 21 and 22 of your packet. At this point, Of the 5 that we received, one of them, again, has a little bit of disciplinary issues with the state. One of them, honestly, based off of their client list, the bulk of their clients are in students or in enrollment districts that are about 40,000 and above. So I do worry about us being a bit of a number to them in terms of engagement, in terms of our priority. But I do present that to you for your consideration. And then one respondent that we had did not give us any assurances that they would be able to get our audit done in our timeline, which would be by the December board meeting. We do have a mandate from TEA to get it in within 150 days of the end of the fiscal year. So it is statutorily required to be in by January 28th. The reason we ask for it to be done in December is we don't want to be waiting to the last minute. We want to know that that's behind us and submitted by the time we're out for our holiday time around Christmas. So for me, I shouldn't say us, for me, that was a big deal as part of the RFQ, because if you couldn't at least tell me that that was your goal and that's what you were going to do right now, then I really worry once we start hitting October and November about us getting it done on time. With all that being said, of any of the 5, we present all 5 of them to you tonight for your consideration. I've listed out 2 firms that I haven't previously mentioned because the 3 that I've mentioned are the ones I have reservations about. The other 2 firms are listed by name in your memo, and so I truly ask for your decision-making in which firm we shall seek to engage with this year and potentially for the next 5 engagements for the external financial audit. And then I guess one more little caveat to it. This would be the firm that we would ask to come in and do the bond engagement, which would be a minor audit, if you will, a little audit in scope, looking at just the 2015 and 16 bond funds as they relate to the projects that voters had approved. So it's not specifically listed in the memo, but this would be the firm that we would ask for that engagement from. And like I say, it's a hard 1-year engagement, and we published it with up to 4 annual extensions if it meets your approval. So this would be for up to a 5-year engagement off the bat.
Do you have any personal experience with either one of the 2 firms that are left on this list?
No, sir. Other than seeing their product online, when you go out and just kind of look at audit firm or audit reports that have been submitted to TEA, I don't know a single soul at either one of these companies to the best of my knowledge.
Do you know where they're headquartered?
One of them is headquartered in Greenville, and the other one I honestly don't know.
Do you know if they represent any other districts locally?
I could go back and look at their list of firms or list of clients that they have. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head that any of them do. No, sir.
What we could do you have that information? We could ask Mr. Carter to come back after closed session. That would give him a few minutes to go back there and find out where one's located and some of the client list.
We asked them for 8 copies of their proposal, so there's one for each of you if you would like to take that with you and review it. We do in our original engagement ask that we begin field work next month, so it would be something that we would ask for a quick turnaround on to get them going for that December report date.
So, board, are you okay if we take no action on this? We get the documentation that they presented and we bring it at our next meeting in July?
Yes.
I'd like to hear Ryan's feelings. I mean, your level of comfort, I can see it on your face. You don't have a very strong level of comfort with these people, with the new people. And do you think it's good business that we change at this point? I mean, are we at that point where you think we need to change?
With what's been said over the last year, absolutely. I think we need to change. And I think we just need to start fresh and go fresh, go new. In all honesty, I don't know any of these from Adam. So because auditing standards are universal, meaning the AICPA puts them out, this is not anything that Waxahachie ISD gets to come up with. We are just subject to whatever AICPA has out there. To me, the end product from all 5 of these is going to be very, very similar. You and I may disagree a little bit on recommendations that we may have for like an internal control or a process and a procedure, but none of that is going to be codified within AICPA requirements. That's just going to be a you and me having a conversation. I may not like you using your debit card. I may prefer a credit card. That's a me personal preference. That's nothing that's going to come out in an audit. So from that standpoint, I think what we're going to get from each of these 5 firms is going to be of high quality, and it's going to be very much consistent from firm to firm. So from that angle, I really don't have, recommendation or hide or hair between any of the firms. I don't know them from anybody else.
How about Dr. Kane?
No, sir, I just,
No strong
I'm in the same
feelings?
boat with Mr. And I agree with him totally that because of not because I think there's a need, but I think because there's a perception, and perceptions are more real sometimes than reality. We need to respect that if there's a community that says, you know what, I think you need to change auditors and look into certain things, I think we should embrace that to show that we're not afraid to do either one of those things. So I think it's a good idea to do that, and I actually think that boards should change auditors school districts should change auditors at least once every 5 years just because of that. Now, I know it's a pain in the business office because they each has a certain way they want you to set up the information, but I think that's just one of those things that you do because it is so important for this community to have confidence that we are above all standards when it comes to accounting, be it a bond issue or just the general accounting that we do, and that we are more responsible. In fact, we will be getting extra stars for our business office efforts.
Mr. Rogers, my conflicts would be in Region 7, which we didn't reach out to. So,
Yeah, as long as you're comfortable with the quality of the product, I mean, that's my concern, is you don't want to change just to change and get an inferior product, but, or you don't want to double the price either, so you have to weigh both.
and unfortunately, in a request for qualifications from the state perspective, price can't even be a consideration for us, so we didn't even ask them for a price on the engagement. With your approval tonight, or even at the next meeting, that would be the next thing we would do, is try to work on an engagement letter with whatever firm is selected to try to figure out what that price would be.
What's your drop dead latest time you can switch?
In all honesty, it's going to be up to the firm and how much they have going. My guess is going to be probably August is going to be skirting it. They're not going to be able to do interim field work, which is fine. That's just that's a time saver on their end. Probably by the end of August, we'll have to have something in place if we're going to meet that January 28th deadline.
If we could do it in July.
If we voted at our next meeting to select one,
I believe that would give, not having asked any of the firms if that would work for them, I believe that would give us enough time to get that done. Maybe not by December, but probably by that January 28th deadline.
So if the board waits, would you like copies of all of these, since they are just the last 2?
Just the 2 is all I didn't.
Yeah, if you just bring the 2.
Absolutely.
8 of the 2.
And we'll bring that after closed session.
okay, this time, so we will be taking no action on item 3B under action agenda tonight. Okay, at this time, the board will adjourn into closed meeting pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.001 et sec. It is now 6:13. Okay, it is now 7:05. We will reconvene back into open session. The only item we have left on our agenda tonight would be our Human Resources Report. Ms. James?
Good afternoon, Board. I would like to ask that you approve the personnel report as recommended by the superintendent. We do have some people here today with us. Our Director of Testing and Accountability, Don Hilburn, is here. We have the Executive Director of Secondary Learning, Curriculum, David Avery. We have Director of Advanced Academics, Jamel Thomas. And we have the new principal from Shackelford Elementary, Rusty East.
Okay, Board, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the HR report.
I make a motion to approve that HR report.
A motion by Ms. Timmermans, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Schofield. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 7-0. Congratulations, everyone. Okay, at this time, go ahead, Dr. King.
Well, I'd like to make a statement about a lot of people were here expecting the high school principal to be named. The high school principal, we will be working with an interim, and as the board does not contract with interims, I will be asking that an interim accept the job. And so is Ms. Tanya Harris here? I would like to ask if you would accept the job as being the interim for Waxahachie High School.
I would be honored to accept the job.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. McCutcheon, for second. Second. By Mr. Schofield. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much.